Alright, so in this video I'm going to show you the entire process of building a strong and affordable storage shelf, which you can easily turn into a fun little weekend project, and which I really should have done years ago. I mean, this is just embarrassing. Probably, let's say, 95% of this chaos is mine. I'll be covering all the stuff you might wonder about, like materials, costs, lessons learned, all of that stuff, and even how to avoid making the same mistakes I made. So you hopefully won't have to flip the entire thing in the middle of the night. The first thing we need to do here is get all these 47 different versions of chaos out, because right now I don't even know how tiny this very tiny room actually is. And the title of this video was originally a big 24-hour surprise storage room transformation surprise or something like that. But seeing as pretty much the entire chaos down here was caused by myself, it's really more of a grown man finally tidying up his own mess kind of thing. Now, with our living room looking like a very convincing argument against just owning stuff, I guess, I'm pretty happy to get out of here and make my way to the local hardware store. This process is always a bit interesting when you don't have a car yourself, but what I typically do is see if I can find a cheap rental car once I'm there. By the way, if you don't have any professional tools at home, the hardware store can usually be quite helpful with cutting up your material for a small fee. I decided to go for these 15mm thick OSB sheets here, and they're gonna be the deciding factor for the depth of the shelf, as I based the entire design on this specific product in advance. That way I'm hoping to avoid having to cut them by hand once I'm home, but of course I'll end up having to do that anyway. Next I went looking for some standard 2x4s, but since I found a cheaper alternative that I'll show you if you just follow me out of frame here, I ended up going for that instead. Now, on the way back, I ran into some trouble, as this was the only car I could find in the area.
I don't think this is gonna work.
I'll probably also run into trouble with the rental service, so let's skip to this part instead. So the shelf itself is gonna be 2 meters tall and 1.5 meters wide, which for my American friends out there is a little bit more than 6 feet tall and about 5 feet long. Ideally, you want a perfectly level working surface, which will make it a lot easier to build this thing straight. But with the uneven floor of our basement, this homemade little workbench here is pretty much as close as I'm gonna get. The first step is to build the actual shelves, by making a box that will be covered by a simple sheet of OSB. The box is made of 2 long 2x4s that are held together by 4 matching shoulder pieces, which means I only had 2 slices of wood for the entire build. This makes batch cutting a lot easier and allows me to make all of my cuts at once. And I know this isn't actually 2x4s in my project, but I'm just gonna call it that since that's probably what 99% of people will normally use. With the framing box complete, we can just screw the OSB sheet in place. If the looks of the shelf is important to you, then these sheets could easily be replaced by a nicer piece of plywood or even MDF for the top. And you could even take the extra time to paint the shelves if the roughness of the material is a problem. Now, as you can see, I decided to build this entire thing upside down, which is typically what you want to do, as it makes the whole thing easier to build, and which is definitely not foreshadowing for later. The legs act as a frame that holds the shelves together, and I'm just going to be using 4 2x4s that are cut to the final height of the unit, with some smaller pieces on the inside to act as support for each shelf. This way, the shelves are not relying solely on screws to stay in place, but instead can be held up by a robust bit of framing, and I can basically just work my way up by adding 1 shelf at a time. Now, with the shelf pretty much finished, we've unfortunately come to the biggest mistake I made in this project, which you've probably already guessed, and in hindsight, I'm not quite sure what I was thinking when I decided to build this huge shelf upside down in a very tiny room. I mean, the shelf is almost as big as the room itself, and since I finished the project late at night and all by myself, I should have known that flipping this thing was gonna be difficult. What I didn't know was just how tricky this was gonna be, and especially with those pesky pipes you can see in the background there, which I think Gandalf himself would have been proud of because they really did not want to let me pass. And with time not being on my side, but also with the power of arrogance fueling my determination, I decided to give it a few more tries, when finally...
Proof of concept. One more to go.
I'm not gonna pretend I wasn't incredibly relieved when I managed to flip it halfway around. And if you're used to trying your hand at stuff you're not particularly good at yourself, you'll know how easy it is to somehow create problems that never needed to be a problem in the first place. But as a good friend and fellow YouTuber Largeting so nicely put it recently, when I come to these points where I want to do something that feels a bit radical, I have to remind myself that I built this, which means I can do it again. So if I mess it up, it's just a matter of time before I have a new one. I really like that way of thinking, and if you want to give this project a go yourself, you can pick up the plans on my website.